Hi, this is Thomas from Believe in the Run.
And this is Megan from Believe in the Run.
And this is Megan from Featherstone Nutrition.
And you're listening to the Fuel for the Soul podcast, where we talk about nutrition, running, and how it affects your life and workouts.
So before we dive into our listener question, let's talk about our sponsor, Inside Tracker. Thomas, what is Inside Tracker?
Funny you should ask. Inside Tracker is an ultra-personalized nutrition platform that uses blood work to create one-of-a-kind, science-backed action plan to help you reach your potential for better performance and a longer, healthier life.
Yeah, so they were founded in 2009, and the Boston company first started working with professional athletes who wanted to see what their biomarkers, hormone, and mineral profiles look like during their training and how they could use nutrition and lifestyle to improve.
Get this, they measure over 30 biomarkers and recommend food and supplements to optimize things like your energy, cognition, endurance, heart health, and more. And
the really great news for you all is for a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering our listeners 25% off their entire store.
Boom.
Just go to insidetracker.com/fuel.
So Meg, why don't you play the question that came in from one of our listeners?
Hey guys, this is Tamanna from Cleveland. I'm super excited for this podcast and have a question for you about fueling. Many athletes speak highly of Generation UCAN, its ability to prevent spikes of blood sugar while allowing for ongoing energy from a carbohydrate source and also allowing for more efficient fat burning. What are your thoughts on this fuel source, and does it really promote fat burning? Is that a good thing for endurance running and trying to get a marathon PR? Is it better or healthier than relying on fast-releasing carbs? Thanks so much.
All right, Megan, tell us your thoughts on Generation UCAN.
Generation UCAN is a product in and of itself out there. There's really nothing else like it. So, if you go to their site and read up on it, it's a superstarch, right? So it's a little bit of a different molecule than anything else that we take. So, really nerding it out for a moment and going back to my younger years as a clinical dietitian, I first heard of this compound in kids with a disease called glycogen storage disease, right? So I think we're all very familiar with glycogen. That's how we store fuel in our body. That's how we carb load. We load our glycogen stores. That's where we pull carbs from to fuel our running. So there's kids who are unable to store glycogen in their liver. And so overnight, their blood sugars were dropping to dangerously low levels. So their parents were having to wake them up and feed them throughout the night to try to maintain blood sugar levels. So they found that if they gave them cornstarch before they went to bed, the way that our body absorbs that is it sustains our blood sugar a little bit more. So shortly after all of this technology, this became more of a sports fuel concept, because the same thought was there. So if we can have a more steady energy source coming into our body, we shouldn't be quote unquote crashing quite as often. So that's kind of where this whole product came from. It came from some research from people who actually were unable to store glycogen in their bodies. So since we can store glycogen in our bodies, right, we're also looking at this superstarch, this fuel, which really it starts as a cornstarch, right? And then they heat treat it, which changes the molecule a little bit and makes it more easily to digest. And then they have kind of formulated this into a product that we are using before workouts. And then now they have a new product that we can use during workouts. And really the goal is to give us a more steady energy source while we're out there, instead of the peaks and valleys that we can get in our blood sugar from taking other type of fuel.
All right, quick question for me right off the bat. It doesn't seem like this is proprietary necessarily. And why do we only, like you said, UCAN's the only one using this? If it's such a great energy source, why aren't we seeing competitors or even, companies like Scratch who, are in this space? Why aren't they incorporating these types of superstarches into their fueling systems?
And I think that's a good question. And, for me, right, as a sports dietitian, thinking to what is the use of this product, I think it has kind of its own little niche. So, the thought of using this product is a very steady blood sugar. So when you look at the research studies that have used UCAN or a similar product, what they find is that our blood sugar is very, 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 very steady, right, for long periods of time. But when we really look at athletic performance, if we're trying to perform at a higher level, we actually need some like high bursts of blood sugar, right? We want like some quick fuel to spike our blood sugar so we can grab it and get it to our muscles versus just this low, slow, steady blood sugar. So I think
So
it's
sort of the
just
difference between, I was going to say, sort of a difference between like a daily trainer and the super shoes. You want that bounce. You want that flick, where maybe a daily trainer is great for those long, steady runs that you don't care about having that responsiveness as much.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy, Thomas.
It always comes back to shoes for me.
So when you take this UCAN versus taking like a Maurten or a Goo or something, are you going to feel the difference out on the run?
So I've played around with all of it. And from a personal standpoint, yes, it's very different. So, I think taking a step back and looking at what are our performance goals allows us to choose what fuel do we need to be using. So if we're going out there for a long, slow, steady state run where we want a very even fueling, something like UCAN beforehand, and even maybe UCAN during, is going to give us that, low, long, steady, lower heart rate, not accomplishing certain, paces or doing a workout, maybe that would work, right? When
Like
I've tried
ultra.
it before, like an ultra, exactly, where you want just that really steady pace. We aren't necessarily working that hard. Because when we know when our heart rate's a little bit lower, we've got kind of we're using more fat for energy, or we're using less sugar. But as intensity increases, so as we are racing a half marathon or at the end of a full marathon, when our intensity is higher, we're relying more on carbohydrates to fuel that type of exercise. So, while something like UCAN is going to give us that baseline energy, we need something a little punchy on top of that to be able to grab. So, for a lot of my athletes, we'll have them do something like UCAN beforehand, 45 minutes beforehand, and then fuel normally with their Maurten, with their Scratch, with their gels, whatever it is during. So to me, it's just a very different product, that some people can add on to their performance routine. But, I typically don't have anyone replace their, during nutrition with that.
That's what I mean, you answered my question. I was like, can you take it both? But then I get into, I'm going to be the devil's advocate for the non-UCAN user. I'm going to say, well, couldn't I just eat carbs before and then also fuel normally for a race? Or even better yet, can I buy some cornstarch and just shove that in my mouth?
So, and this is the beauty of running. There are so many options and so many different products that work for everyone, right? And that's why I love my job, is trying to figure out what works for you. So what works for one person doesn't work for the next person. And some products are much more expensive than other products. So to your point, somebody that wants to use something like straight cornstarch, and I do have a couple athletes who do that, and they swear that it works great, right? And for their budget, that works for them. If you go back to UCAN and ask them the difference, they're going to tell you that the heat treated, cornstarch that they use is more easily digested. It's going to cause less GI upset, which is a huge marketing point for them, is that UCAN, is very easily digested. So for people who do have stomach trouble when they're out there, they typically can tolerate something like UCAN. So, that's kind of the big selling point there. But I mean, I'll tell you what, I have had athletes fuel with pretty much everything to a successful race. So it's just finding what works for each individual.
So getting some calories in there is important.
Right. Just eating, please, take in something.
Well, Tamanna asked another question in her thing. She said it would help lose weight and be able to...
No, just fat burning.
Fat burning, which I think people equate with weight loss. So maybe you can help us understand that a little better, because I think there is a difference between when people think of fat burning, calorie burning. Like when I guess if I think I'm burning calories, I'm burning fat. or, whatever's in, like probably the glucose that's in my muscles or whatever has that. But how would UCAN help burn fat or help you use fat as a fuel source? And is that something that, we talk about keto, and one time I went through a whole keto thing and tried to run on that, and it was a shitty way to get through runs and to fuel. In my body, I don't think ever really switched over to fat because I was doughy even after that. But you tell me what I need to know.
So you and your doughy conversation here is actually exactly the point I want to make here. So just because we're oxidizing fat, which for anybody listening that's like, what the heck are you talking about? It means we're burning fat for fuel, right? So we can do studies and we can look at when we're exercising, are we burning fat or are we burning sugar? I mean, newsflash, we're always burning both, but sometimes we're burning more fat. Sometimes we're burning more carbs. So sometimes we confuse, or it gets kind of muddy when we start talking about fat oxidation and weight loss, right? Just because we're oxidizing fat doesn't necessarily mean we're changing body composition and losing tons of fat overall, right? It's just kind of what is our body using as an energy source as we're exercising? Is it more fat? Is it more carbs? So, when we actually look at, kind of taking this down that weight loss tunnel that you were talking about, Thomas, when we're actually talking about people trying to change body composition through running, right? We want to lose more weight. What we end up finding from most of the studies is it depends on intensity. So if we can work out harder, we can burn more total energy, which is going to help more with weight loss than anything else. So to your point with the keto, how did you feel when you were trying to run on a keto diet?
Exhausted.
Right. So how was your workout?
All the time. But
yeah.
They weren't the best. That it's interesting you say that, because I've actually heard, like, when they talk to people about heart rate, and they're like, the lower your heart rate, the more fat you're burning. So do these low intensity workouts and you'll burn weight. If you're running hard, you're not burning weight. You're just burning, whatever. I don't even know, because I'm not
burning more fat. Yeah. Yeah. When your heart rate's lower.
You're saying no, intense workouts get the metabolism roaring and shed the weight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. They've done some awesome research where they look at those high interval intensity, those HIIT workouts, and especially for like middle-aged women, that's where the money is from trying to change body composition, is getting that heart rate up and then dropping it, getting that heart rate up and then dropping it. So yes,
Orange Theory is the way to go. Stop running, people.
I've never been.
Yeah. No, so interval training would be, if you're looking to lose weight, throw in some interval training.
Absolutely. Yeah. More so than let's oxidize fat. The research just isn't there quite as strong for total body composition changes. Yeah.
All right. One more thing on UCAN before we leave this one. It also sounds like something, since you're talking about people who don't have glycogen stores. Did I even say that correctly? I think I did. Is that's something that diabetics get into. So is UCAN something that would help stabilize somebody with diabetes?
I mean, it could. And I guess, like when you look at a graph of someone's blood sugar when they consume something like UCAN, it's just really steady. There's not a whole lot of ups and downs, and it's really steady for like 4 hours. So if you take it before a long run, right, it's going to be really steady energy. Whereas if you're taking something like a simple carbohydrate gel or something, it spikes, right? It goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down. So when we're talking about
bagel?
Maintain a bagel. Well, and that's true though. I would love actually to see what a bagel would do versus like UCAN beforehand. That would actually be a fantastic study. I would expect the bagel might spike a little bit more, but to your earlier point, Thomas, is, there's lots of different ways that we can fuel before a run. And real food is an awesome way to fuel before a run as well.
Generation bagel right here.
So when Maurten came out, and it was sort of around the same time as the Breaking 2 project, and there was like all this hype and marketing and quote unquote science around the hydrogel that is superior to all the other gels and goos and chews. Is there any science behind that?
So where this came from, which I was very intrigued to watch this go down, because we used to think that a runner, any human, right, could only process so many grams of carbs an hour without our stomach like literally blowing up. Because if we dump too much sugar into our stomach, water rushes in there to try to even out, all the stuff that's in there. And then that ends up causing GI distress when all that water rushes in there and then it dumps out. Right. So when we're looking at something like trying to run faster, like breaking two, we need more carbs at one time to be able to fuel that. So that's where all of this technology came from, right? Like we want to be able to dump more sugar into these super fast runners' stomach without it causing GI distress. So that's where this kind of hydrogel technology came from, which their thought was, if we put these, I think it was some pectin and sodium alginate, and if we put that in there, it's going to coat that sugar while it's in our stomachs so that our stomach's not going to know there's that much sugar there. And then when it gets to our small intestines where we actually absorb that sugar, we'd be able to access it. Right. So that was kind of the thought behind this. And if you look at, the Breaking Two project, they were able to take in ungodly grams of carbs an hour. It was like 80 to 90 grams of carbs an hour, which is crazy.
That's why Iliad's so fat, by the way.
Right? Clearly he's taking a simple sugar and he's okay. So we thought we needed to do something different to allow people to tolerate that much sugar. So that was kind of the thought around it. When you really look at the research, and granted, all research is, taken with a grain of salt, but when they put it head to head with the hydrogel and something else, there seems to be the same amount of GI complaints and the same performance. So is it really superior? Again, I think it goes back to what works for the individual. If somebody has a lot of stomach issues, maybe Maurten works better for them. So then by all means, it's totally worth it. And that works better for that one person. But I don't think everybody needs to rush out and use the exact same thing. I just don't think I think there's lots of good choices that we can.
Yeah. I hate that I love Maurten because it is like $250 a
every
bag.
gel. It's like
gel.
You're just like throwing money.
Yeah. So when you're doing training runs, you're like, wow, this one's costing me. But I do find like I've gone on runs with Maurten and I didn't have enough Maurten. So I grabbed like a goo or something like that and backed it up. And I found that the goo, I would feel like a surge of energy and it would go away real fast. With the Maurten, I feel like the energy does maybe peak and then you stay at that peak a little bit longer. And whether it sounds like to me, you're saying it's like a slow release. So it's encapsulated in this gel. As your body digests it, the gel gets separated from it eventually and the sugar comes, which could mean that's why the energy lasts a little bit longer because it's spread out. I mean, most of the time, I think with a goo, you want to get it over with so quickly. It's like, get that. Oh, it's like swallowing, gag reflex, get it down. And I find myself when I'm running with a Maurten, I can put a little in, I'll put it in my cheek or something, just kind of let it dissolve there a little bit. And I don't have to just try to like take the whole packet all in one swallow.
See, this is why I really want to, if there's anybody listening out there that can answer this question for us, I want to know if this is why those gels have like a texture to them, almost like a Jello shot, right? Because I swear that helps you swallow it. Like when you get like that thin liquid in your mouth, sometimes I think it's really hard. Yeah. So I swear there's like a theory, like there's a reason they did that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we both use Maurten and I don't know. What do you think? As far as
for me it's a texture thing. Like I used to only do the chews because the goos just really, the texture grosses me out, and the Maurtens for whatever reason, because they're more of that like Jello, it's just easier.
Yeah, I don't know if you listened to our other podcast, but we talked to Steph Flippin, and her husband put her gels on ice for her so that when she got her gels they were cold, and I was like, that sounds like the best way. I mean, nothing's worse than getting a hot goo in the mouth.
Right. And again, it's like that feeling in your mouth and that provokes you to swallow. Yeah. And Steph also mixes scratch with Maurten. Did she tell you that? She's a queen. Yeah. Oh yeah. Just
what?
Mixes everything up. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, wow.
All right, guys, jumping in here to remind you about our sponsor, Inside Tracker.
So if you're listening before you know already, they measure over 30 biomarkers and recommend food, supplements to optimize things like energy, cognition, endurance, heart health, and more.
And for a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering our listeners 25% off their entire store. Just go to insidetracker.com/fuel.
Do it. Hey, you know what I wanted to get into?
What?
I wanted to talk about the shot. Because I think I know what was wrong with my marathon performance.
Well, so last time we ended, you were going to go get blood tests.
Yes.
And you did go get blood tests. And what did you find out?
Okay. I found out that when I send my results to Feathers, she'll look at them and tell me what it says. And she said that I was low in B12 and maybe a little low on iron. Yeah.
That's what we said, Thomas. Like we felt like we were just reaching. Like your B12 had dropped and it was low end to normal, and your iron had dropped, but it was still in a great range. I mean, there was a few things that were like, maybe these things came together and messed with performance, but nothing blaring wrong in your blood work.
That's the thing that has been the most difficult about. Like I was trying to realize, I'm going through why this was a disappointing marathon performance, and the problem is that there's no culprit to blame. There's no like thing where I can go, I can fix this, and next one I got a better shot. This was the worst nightmare of a runner, where it's like I just couldn't run that day, and there's no reason for it. But in my search for that reason, because you got to have a reason, right? My search started thinking about two things, and one of them was I recently, April 28th, I got the first shot of Moderna, and I also went on a trip to high altitude to Colorado a week before the race, and then had the race. And after getting the second shot of Moderna and knowing how it ravaged my muscles and my muscle system, I'm like, maybe it wasn't enough to feel crappy like I did after the second shot, but maybe it was just enough to make, like, my legs felt like lead out of the gate. And I was like, is it possible that having that first shot that close to the race could have sabotaged me? And on top of that, even before the race, I think I was kind of hitting like a little low level depression. And so I called, I spoke to Feathers and I said, this is what's going on. And believe it or not, tell them what you said.
The exact same thing. I was sitting behind my computer a week after I'd gotten my second shot, Googling to try to find out if depression and low motivation was a symptom of getting a vaccine, because I did not feel like myself. I felt like I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. I was just down all the time. And that is not me. Like usually, like I have those moments, but I can pick myself up real quick. And I just felt awful physically, mentally for weeks after that second shot. And I was literally trying to find someone somewhere that could commiserate with me, and I wasn't able to find it. You get on social media and all us runner studs, you're like, oh, my arm hurt a little bit, or I was fine, or, no one was really talking about how they were feeling after these vaccines, which, we all know we want to get so we can get back to racing. But, no one really seemed to be talking about all that. So when Thomas called and was like, I think it's it, I'm like, oh my God, I felt the exact same way.
And I mean, Megan, I had you in the kitchen and I said, something's wrong with me. I am down. Like I am not, you need to understand that I am not mentally well. And Megan's first thing was go see someone. I'm like, I don't think that's it. I know what they would tell me. And it has, I think just talking to you that day and kind of acknowledging that, hey, this could be some sort of side effect, immediately made me feel better and made me kind of like, okay, well, if that's it, it's going, the clouds are going to clear and the stuff will move to the side. But yeah, I was feeling uninspired, uncreative, unmotivated, like just down. I was like, well, maybe this is post marathon blues or maybe that, but it was something else.
And I was the same way, because it was like, second week of February in Northeast Ohio. It was cold. It was gross. I couldn't see my friends. I'm like, Megan, this is just this time of year. It has nothing to do with this vaccine. But yeah. And then when I started feeling better, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, vaccines are promoting, an acute inflammatory response across our body to provoke our immune system, I mean, and it's going to affect everybody differently. However, we're coming into this, right? So Thomas, I mean, you got yours like literally in the peak of your training. I was training super hard at that point. And so it's like any runner or any athlete who's, expecting a ton out of their body, a vaccine is going to be a bigger insult, or we're going to notice, right? Because we're so much more self-aware about our bodies and our performance and how we feel. We're just going to notice these things so much more than say maybe someone who's not expecting that much of their body. We're going to notice these changes, and I think it's just something that a lot of people aren't really talking about right now.
Yeah. And I would have, I still think that the vaccine is a good thing to get. I mean, we were just in Charleston this weekend and it's like normal there. Like restaurants are open, streets were open. There was no mask. Like we left the house without masks.
It was like a different world.
Ah, beautiful.
It was. And you go to restaurants and you see people's faces, you see smiles. Like you don't realize how much information your brain gets from being able to see faces. And how many more cues we get from the public when we're out and you can see faces. And it was just nice. And so definitely get the vaccine. Maybe don't do it around your event.
Maybe not 2 weeks before your marathon is the takeaway here, but yes, that's all.
I do think probably people aren't talking about it because they're assuming it is those other factors. Like you were saying, it was because it was in the middle of winter and you hadn't seen people. And like Thomas is thinking, we have a lot of going on at work and we were traveling. And I think your brain just automatically goes, it can't be that. It has to be all these other things going on. But it would be very interesting to see if they will have any research on the vaccine and the side effects.
And I was searching for some and I haven't found anything legit yet, but there have been some really good articles that some different coaches and runners have put out there, talking about just some one-offs, right? Like I had an athlete that had COVID and the only real symptom with runs was just this crazy high heart rate. And to Thomas's point, then when he got vaccinated, that crazy high heart rate came back. That was kind of the symptom after the vaccine too. So I think it's just, this is the weirdest illness ever. And it seems to hit everybody different. This vaccine seeming to hit everybody different. So just kind of having that awareness that it might be part of it and, take care of ourselves until we have built that immunity and are feeling a little better.
I think Feathers is correct when she says that most people, I don't think I would notice stuff if I wasn't normal training. I'd just be like, I had a couple bad runs. I'll have to go back through my Strava and look at my performances from April 28th forward and see if there's any type of pattern. I haven't done that because I've got other crap to do. But if I wasn't racing, I would just be like, I'm just not feeling it right now and move forward. So I don't think I'd notice. I think it hitting when it hit puts some question in my mind of like my body was not able to perform that day. Like I grinded that marathon out like to finish. Like that was a painful finish. And the only thing I can think is that, and then getting the second shot, it almost confirms it because like what my body felt like wasn't that far off from what it felt like at the end of that. And just the muscle fatigue and like when you got the second shot, I feel like you had more of a fever. For me, I had like whole body cramping, like my back was sore. My muscles were all sore. So, to her point where everybody reacts differently to this vaccine, I think that there are differences. It'll be interesting. I've said this since the beginning. I'm waiting for this 10-year out review of what really happened here with this pandemic and what they had us on respirators in the beginning, and that turns out that was probably killing people. We're going to learn a lot from all that stuff. So that'd be my wrap up of that. And it's such a positive note.
Everybody get vaccinated.
Yeah.
But Megan, so you had yours quite a while ago now. Do you feel like you are pretty much back to normal?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I had my first one. I want to say it was like the third week of January. And then the first or second week of February, I had Moderna too. Yeah. And yeah, but I felt it right on runs, and I felt it. Same with you, Meg. I, had a super high fever for a couple of days, but I totally feel great now. And if somebody told me I needed a booster, I'd do it, right? Trying to keep everybody around me safe. So
yeah, I'm definitely pro getting the vaccination just for the fact that experiencing Charleston was like, if this is what post-vaccination is like, then let's go for it. But yeah, I'm hoping. I still feel like I'm not 100% back. Obviously, what day did I get it? Like Friday or Thursday? Thursday, and today is Tuesday, so I'm not quite a week out. But I did some runs over this weekend, and then I did a run this morning. Felt a little bit better. I did some striders at the end, but I'm not doing like sustained speed yet. Except for when I was going downhill on that bridge. That was fun.
All right. That's enough vaccine talk for today. So we answered Tamanna's question, but let's just sort of recap. If we're looking at fuel for the long run, slow release versus fast release carbs, and if there's a correct brand, what are you going to say?
So I think we can't hit home enough that there are so many different options for fueling during our runs. We need to find what works for us individually. We need to fuel, right? I'm usually, fighting with athletes to fuel enough. So I want us to find the product that you're willing to fuel enough with. So for everybody, that's a little bit different. So, if that's chews, if that's gels, if that's, UCAN beforehand, if that's a bagel beforehand, if it's UCAN plus a bagel beforehand, I think it just cannot hit home enough the importance of chocolate cake before you run. Just kidding. And just making sure that we figure it out. If it doesn't work, we try something new. We continue to practice. Like I said, I like the combination of something like a bagel plus UCAN before and my scratch chews during. I'm happy to use multiple different brands, but I think, we just have to help each individual athlete figure out what is that for them. And to you guys' point earlier, you guys feel so much better when you take the Maurten gels, you feel that sustained energy. So that works for you, right? So we need to find what that is for each athlete.
All right, cool. And you know what you might need to test your fueling on? You could use it during grit, which is you can sign up for now. You just go to believeintherun.com/grit to sign up. And we already have a nice group of people taking the challenge on for July.
Yep. It's going to be a hot, fun summer.
Perfect time to test out hydration and nutrition. So thanks again to Tamanna for sending in her question for this week. Really helpful. I learned a lot. And you know what? If you want your question answered, you can go to the Anchor app, record your question. We'll play it on the show just like we did Tamanna's. And if you're too shy, don't want your voice, you can always message us. Meg, where do they message us?
You can email us. The email address is on the Anchor app. Or you can just DM us at Believe in the Run on Instagram.
Yeah, and hit us up, and we will answer your nutrition questions with a super duper brain on nutrition. It's Megan Featherston of Featherstone Nutrition, aka Feathers, and she will tell you herself. Call her Feathers.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will chat with you next time.